We're changing the top hats because the ones that are on there are old and cracked. Tom was already up on jack stand, so we start by removing the brake caliper. It's two large bolts that come off easily. Don't let the caliper hang by the brake hose. I hung the caliper on a brake line mount with an S-hook that Rick made for me out of a piece of wire coat hanger. Now let's get the tie rod end off the steering knuckle. We have to remove the cotter pin first. Not too bad. Sometimes they're a real pain to remove. Next is the castellated nut. We'll have to separate that with a ball joint popper later. Unless it falls off by itself. Next come the two bolts that connect the strut tower to the control arm. These don't seem to have been touched in 35 years and are tight. I had to use the breaker bar to get them loose. I know, it's like I'm Rick or something. After they are loose, we should be able to run them out with a ratchet.
Oh, how about that? Have to rely on the breaker bar or get used to being called princess. That breaker bar will cure what ails you. And if it doesn't, it'll certainly tear the head off the bolt.
Yeah, well. Oh. Huh. Cute.
What?
The tie rod end came out.
Now I know why it didn't seem like there was any resistance when Rick was holding the wheel. I've never had a tie rod just pop out on its own before. Normally you have to use a ball joint popper or a hammer, and the thing seems to explode when it comes free. This is the only time working on this car anything has been easy.
See, that's why you should own
There we go.
a Japanese car and a German car. Because
There we
then
go.
all your tools get to work.
Now that the shock tower is free of the control arm and tie rod, Rick removes the three nuts holding the strut assembly to the car. This is where it helps to have a friend, as the shock assembly weighs an F-ton. And when the nuts come loose, someone has to be ready to catch it. With the strut out, it's time to remove some of that grime. To remove the top mounts from the strut body, we start by attaching a set of spring compressors to the coil spring. Alternate tightening each compressor a bit at a time to keep the spring even. I kept working the spring tighter and tighter until the pressure was off of the strut top. Next, remove the nut that holds the mount to the strut body and pull the old mount off. I don't know how old these mounts are, but they are way past the freshness date.
Oh yeah, that thing is perished, isn't
Yeah, it's done. That thing's toast. That's toast.
it? Oh yeah. Pretty handy with that knife, aren't you?
Ooh.
Take a little time to enjoy that new part smell.
There it is.
KYB.
Yeah, no
Nice.
expense was spared in the making of it.
No expense butter. $12.50 each.
Slide the new mount onto the shaft and tighten down the retaining nut. Make sure
Right
you
here
index
is
the
the
spring in
index.
its perch. It can move around during this process, and it needs to be seated properly.
Yeah, that's impossible because
Dude, would I lie to you?
Now it's time to start releasing the tension on the spring by loosening the spring compressors.
Oh my God.
Now we can get the whole thing back in the car. I have to sit on the floor and push the shock up through the tower while Rick struggles to get the nuts back on. And struggles. And struggles. And struggles. This thing is not light, and though I like to poke fun at him, if Rick wasn't here to help, getting the strut back in would have been a major effort. Or I could have just seated the strut on the control arm mount and tightened the mount nuts at my leisure. Hindsight and all that.
All right, we're good. You don't
Oh, shite.
shiter. Whatever you gave me works. Here.
Reseat the strut back onto the control arm.
Now remember, we can't do the final tightening until the car's sitting on the ground, which means we can't forget to do that.
Right.
Because we don't want it going down the road and the brakes falling off like I've had to do. Learn from my mistakes, young Padawan.
And tighten the bolts back down. Maneuvering the brake caliper back over the disc can be fiddly, but keep the pads in place as best you can and it should slip back into place. Now just tighten the mounting bolts back down.
Oh, my head's racing away in the time lapse. Ugh. We got about 5 minutes of fat head Rick in there.
He's so fat.
Look at that fat head with
Jesus.
bald spot.
You seen that much fat before?
I know. You ever seen that many wrinkles on the back of someone's head?
Oh, they seen me.
Why didn't he just shave his head like Matthew and own it? Because I ain't ready for that.
Dude, I have told that to people. I'm like, why don't you just go ahead and shave it and own it, dude?
That's right, man.
I'm like, you would physically look better.
Hey, I'm going to tell you what, women like bald-headed guys. You know.
Well, I think women like guys that aren't trying to hide their...
𝗡𝗶𝗴𝗵𝘁. Who would have thought that ugly 𝗡𝗶𝗴𝗵𝘁 was a sexy dude, right? You know. And then Patrick Stewart with his bald head.
Who played Kojak?
Yeah.
Yeah. 𝗡𝗶𝗴𝗵𝘁.
𝗡𝗶𝗴𝗵𝘁. I was like, really? They're like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh no, I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, but you had hair.
Yeah.
Guys with hair don't know. They don't understand. But, like all of us, man, nature has its way.
Walk away. Get up. Walk out. Walk out. Just walk.
Time to get some burgers.
Let's get Tom back on the ground. We need dollies on the rear so we can push the back of the car out away from the wall to avoid the WRX. This is the first time the Celica has moved under its own power in months.